So, how are you doing?
Amazing.
So what are we talking about today? Sacred spaces, right? That's going to be a core focus of what we're talking about, but I'm sure we'll branch off to many, many things because, the life and the spiritual experience is many things. But yeah. So do you want to start off by, with sacred spaces, sort of kind of give a background of your mission, where you started, your path, and what's inspired you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. Like, where do I start? Well, first off, thank you, for having me in your space and for me to be able to share a little bit about my life experience, my human experience. Definitely not a dull moment in this fucking experience. So, I guess my origin story. I've been a mystic since as long as I could remember. As a child, I was extra sensitive to energies, to other people's emotions. I would walk in a room and I would feel what everybody was feeling, even if they weren't speaking it. I would see colors, auras, and I would see people in different dimensions too, from angels to people who have passed. And, I grew up in a very dogmatic Catholic family, at least from my mom's side. And she had a little bit of curiosity with metaphysics. During the time in Venezuela, during the 60s, 70s, Connie Mendez was very popular. So she was kind of like an Abraham Hicks. So my mom was super into her and bought some of her books. And when I was about 9 years old, my mom took me to see a famous astrologer in my hometown of Maracaibo. His name was Elmer Trujillo, rest in love. Super famous astrologer. And yeah, so when I walked into his office, I mean, I remember what he was wearing. I remember the details in the walls. I remember the pictures of the galaxies and the planets and mantras. And it was the first time in my life that I actually had kind of like an outer body experience, and I kind of remember having like these really intense emotions as a child, like of what the hell was happening in this room. And it was almost like a remembrance of whatever I'm seeing, these images of the galaxies and the stars. That's where I'm from. So ever since then, I started, as I grew up, you know um buying books about being a Scorpio, about astrology. I had a cassette that this man Elmer had given me from that session I had with him, and I still till today at 32 I carry it around because I can hear myself as a kid talking to him and responding to him, and yeah, I thought it was a fascinating thing. So that definitely like left a mark. And then at 16, growing up in high school, you start really looking out into the external, fitting in, being exposed to a larger community. When you're in high school, it's like a lot more people. I had also moved to Orlando, so I was new, and I had moved from Miami. I started having like an existential crisis, I guess, like really deep emotions like rage, sadness, depression. Like I didn't understand like why other people didn't see life in a deeper way. And I always thought everything was so superficial. And even though I was like, you know, um, I had my group of friends, whatever, inside I always felt very alone. And that's something that was with me throughout my life, like feeling like I didn't fit in. So at 16, through mutual friends, or I don't even know how this happened, my mom ended up connecting with this woman named Marilena, who my mom asked her to come to our house to support my little brother because he was also going through some deep emotional change, and he was a lot younger than me. And to make the story a little bit shorter, she ended up becoming my therapist. And I started working on, she was a psychotherapist. She was also an astrologer. So I started working on these deeper aspects of myself through the sessions with her. And then I became her apprentice of astrology and psychotherapy. So I studied psychoastrology. That's my background since I was about 16.
So this you met
And
her when you were about 16 years old?
yeah, I was 16 when I met her.
That's interesting that what was happening is you're at that age. I teach this in my class. We have 12 dimensions of the physical. And right at that age, I think it's 14 to 20, it's sort of, this is kind of why teenagers feel kind of overwhelmed, or like kind of like, who am I, is because they're starting to see, okay, how do I fit into the bigger whole, right? Because it's like when we start out and we come out, it's just little baby us, it's just us, and it's our family, then it's our bigger group of people. But then it's like, okay, how do I start fitting in the masses? And actually, it's really cool because you said, well, then I started learning, and that's the fifth dimension. It's like education. It's like we were talking about this before the call. Is like, how do I, learning through archetypes? And, you were saying like learning through this lady in astrology. There's plenty of archetypes in astrology. So
Oh yeah.
sorry, it's just kind of light bulb went off.
No, please. Yeah, that's yeah, it's really interesting. There are many archetypes in astrology, and yeah, I started really diving deep into these, I don't know, we can call them esoteric studies, the like things that like people it wasn't really talked about, and I had no one to share it with. I mean, it was just like my own inner world with like what I shared with my teacher and a few other students that she had, but they were all way older than me. I had no community, and I found myself just feeling alone for the most part. Yeah, so that was like my journey when I was, growing up. And then I started going through just really, started to kind of ignore that part of me. It was so sensitive, and I felt like it was like a curse. So there was a point between like 16 and 20 where I started repressing these aspects of me. And I'm like, no, I'm crazy. Like this isn't going to allow me to have like a normal life. There's no way I can be a mystic in this life. So, I entered college, started having college experiences, like went to FSU, like focused on like, my friends and working. But I always had like some sort of Buddha with me, or like images of like a yin and a yang, and or yang. I was always very attracted to this, uh, yeah, to this mysticism, right? And looking back at who Vanessa was during that time, I mean, she was so creative. Like there was so much creativity like pouring out of her. But for me, I didn't think that that was something that could allow me to flourish in this lifetime. I'm like, this is just for crazy people. But that was like Vanessa, like during that time, just because I had no community, which now is something that's a big part of my life.
That's a very
Uh,
good point, actually, because people look at the spiritual stuff and the mystic stuff as like, oh, that's that thing outside of there. It's like cool. It's kind of like mind candy. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, just it's cool, but like they don't know how to apply it, right? Or it's kind of like a
yeah,
power. It's like, what you're saying with your spiritual senses. It's like you have all this power, but if we don't know how to channel that properly, it can be overwhelming. And then we're kind of like, it's too, let me just, I've done that myself, when I was a kid, after, I was having all these like psychic experiences and stuff. And I'm like, I don't have anybody to like teach me about this, talk to, like, thought it was crazy. I'm
yeah,
sure like, I'm sure many, many people have had that experience. So we just kind of like, were intimidated by it, and then we just shut it off.
yeah, 100%,
But
a
it's always
hundred
like, it's
percent.
sort of always kind of knocking there, right?
Always, it's always there. It's always there. We just at the time I was definitely choosing to ignore it. And also like I started getting into relationships, and the people that I was dating, had no notion of this world. And it was also something that I couldn't share with my partners at the time, which I've learned so much through these teachers that have shown up in the form of relationships. But not to get too deep into that. My teacher, I actually now like remembering back, she ended up coming back into my life when I was about 22. So towards like the end of my college experience. She ended up coming back into my life. And, this woman, I honor her forever throughout lifetimes, because she was an anchor for me many times. She was the teacher that showed up when I was like on the brink of like an existential crisis. And as a Scorpio, I mean, I like molt every fucking day. Like it's still something that happens. And um, I've just learned to like live in less intensity with that. But yeah, so, when I was graduating college, I was bartending in downtown Orlando, and the guy I was dating at the time told me to get my real estate license, and never thought about real estate, whatever. Then I started having clients when I was bartending in downtown, that they were office brokers from this big corporate company. And every Friday they would come to the bar and they would tell me what they did and how much they made. And I was just like, And that's the first time I ever heard about commercial real estate because you always think about houses, right? And I'm like, you fucking losers make how much money? You people, no way. They had no personality. They were like very arrogant and etc. So of course, like my college self, I was like, dude, I got this. So I end up getting my license and I start knocking on doors on commercial real estate firms. And I went to like big corporate companies, and, they didn't want to hire me because I was like this young, fresh out of college, bartender downtown energy. And it's crazy to think that that was how they perceived me.
I had the same thing. When I did real estate, everyone was like, "Oh no,
No way.
that young guy," and then they would work with an older agent, and the older agent would screw them over. And then I was like, "Well, it's
That's
very interesting
crazy.
how sort of your age is a big factor.
For sure.
Understandable to assume that, but you know, it really just comes down to the
Yeah,
results."
yeah, 100%. I mean, the guys that were, coming to the bar every Friday were like, it's going to be really hard for you. You're a woman. This is a male dominated industry. And I remember those words so vividly. And I was like, wow, this makes me want to do it even more. So I ended up, my life has always been a series of synchronicities, as it is when you start to notice really like the patterns. I ended up having dinner at a friend's house that I hadn't seen in years. Her dad was neighbors with a young guy. He was like in his 40s, family guy. He had just started a commercial real estate firm. His name was Dave, or his name is Dave. We're still good friends. I call Dave, he gives me his number, and I leave him a voicemail. And Dave doesn't call me for like 2 weeks, like, or actually, like, I think like a month that happened. He was traveling, and I was like, waiting for his call. It didn't come. Finally, a month later, he's like, "Oh yeah, 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 come by. Yeah, 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 whatever, come by. Yeah, sure." And I'm like, "Okay, this guy, I need to get this job. Like, I don't know how, but this guy needs to hire me." I end up showing up at his office. It was on top of Stagger Inn. I don't know if you're familiar with downtown Orlando.
Yeah, yeah, I know
The
what's up.
office is on top of Stagger Inn. I go up the elevator and, they see my resume and I'm like, look, dude, I will sweep the floors. Like, please give me a chance. Like, I will be your intern. I'm going to keep bartending downtown. Just please give me an opportunity. And he
That's a
did.
really that's a really good point though, because when people start things, they're not willing to do just whatever it takes, right? Even people that come to me for healings and stuff, like, I don't initially tell them up front, but like, if you are willing to work with me, I'm willing to work with you. And whatever, like, let's bridge the gap. Like, if you're at this point here, and I'll meet you where you're at as long as you're able to do the work as well. I think that's a really good point you made because people if they get told no or they're like, oh, I can't do it, the first thing they think is, oh, I guess I'm just not going to do it. It's not for me, right? But it's cool, like, to have,
100%.
it's cool, like, if somebody has like actual wants to persevere and have drive, it's like they'll there's many different options to get a result, right? So it's like, hey, I'm willing to do this, and yeah, it's really cool. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know why. There was like this drive that was bigger than me, that was like, you have to get into commercial real estate. I don't have family in commercial real estate. I found out later that my dad built some buildings in Venezuela, but it was nothing like I had no connection to it because most people in commercial real estate, it's like a family thing. Like it's like, oh, like I have family in real estate, like that. So I end up, working with these guys for like 2 years. And then I started, moving from company to company, learning about retail leasing, about development. It was a really slow climb, dude. Like it was really tough. I didn't start making money for until like 3 years in, but there was something inside of me that was like, don't give up. And then as I started making friends in the industry, people would always give me the same feedback. They're like, you're really good at this, but you're like a mystic, you're like a monk, and you have all of you're like in yoga and you meditate, and what are you doing here, And the culture was hardcore. I mean, people were doing all sorts of who fucking knows, like pills and drugs to like stay up. And, it's like Wolf of Wall Street kind of shit, like Adderall, Coke, people smoking, whatever, cigarettes, like everything. Like I was in an environment where, people were fucking awesome, but there was that very no respect to the body quality, no respect to work life balance. So I saw how these brokers and these developers were like destroying themselves. So anyway, so I was like, what the hell am I doing here, dude? So that's where my real estate journey started. And I eventually started working for a developer in 2020. I was his retail leasing person. I mean, it was a small firm, small projects, and I was 3 years with him. I real estate was supplying like my life. Uh, but I got hardcore into, okay, I'm going to be serious about being an astrologer. You know, this is something that's always been a part of my life. And I'm going to be a healer full time because I'm here to heal people and help. Even though I always felt resistance to it, I'm like, oh, fuck, like, I don't really want to do this. But like, you know, I get so called by my friends and by the people around me to have this, to play this role that maybe it's for me. So the deeper I got into it, the more I learned, the more knowledge on the intellectual level that I acquired. I was also having these matching experiences that were driving me deeper and deeper into solitude, into the sense of self, into who Vanessa is, like without societal structures, without, you know, this story of who I think I have to be. I got to a point where I was also not satisfied. I was not happy. I'm like, I'm helping people, but I feel like people don't want to go as deep. People don't want to go as deep. They want a quick solution to everything. And I started
Most
getting
people don't.
frustrated. They don't. And I started getting frustrated as fuck. And I'm like, dude, being a full-time mystic doesn't feel right to me either. It's like I feel like I'm like avoiding many things. During that time, I'm kind of like skipping through like timeline, but during that time in 2021, at the end of 2021, you know, I had the most profound ceremony I've sat in, which was the death of my dad. It changed me. Everything I ever learned about the universe, about loving people, about everything went out the window. Everything went out the window, Michael. Like, I thank God I had the practices to help me withstand the grievance that the grieving that I was in. I wanted to die. When my dad died, I wanted to die with him.
That's a good point.
And it was a ceremony of grief that I had for 3 years. So during that time, during this cycle of 3 years that really just ended just a few months ago, I ended up moving to India and I got rid of everything. I mean, I got rid of my paintings, my crystals, my clothes, everything. The only thing I didn't get rid of was my car. And I ended up leaving to India to Mysore for 6 months to practice Ashtanga with my teacher, Ajay Kumar. And I wanted to run away. You know, I wanted to run away. I'm like, this is it. Like, I'm going to move to the Himalayas, shave my head like this. I'm done with this. I'm done with the West forever.
Yeah.
So the circumstances, I mean, my teacher one day was like, your pilgrimage is over. Go back home. Like, stop trying to stay. You know, this is
That's
a
super
mountain
cool.
that you climb. Yeah, it's the mountain you climb and you go back home and
That's really
teach.
cool because
Yeah,
a lot of people when their stuff comes up and they're, you know, kind of forced into growing in life, they just want to run away. Like it's sort of, I mean, you know, I'm sure many people can understand what you're saying is like, hey, I just want to go to India and shave my head and just like be a monk, whatever. I don't want to deal with, you know, the matrix life or whatever. And it's like kind of what you're through your story, you're saying like, hey, I was in the real estate, it's very kind of matrix based, and I was a mystic, right? It's opposite poles, right? And so
for
it's like,
sure.
you know, you went deep into one side and deep in the other. And it's really cool to hear that your teacher was like, hey, now go back, right? Because it's like we can't affect
Yeah,
change if we're just purely in only the spiritual realm. It's like we're supposed to gain those tools and that wisdom to apply them into life to, you know, like we'll probably get further into the conversation, but like that's how we raise the
yeah,
state of the mundane, just kind of the basic, the crap is to, you know, we do have to play in both those worlds if we want to affect change in the physical. Yeah, it's really cool that your teacher said that.
yeah. I was like crying. I was like, no, I don't want to go back. But, you know, I felt when I was able to really be still, I felt that it resonated with me. Um, but it was many deaths, you know, I had many deaths, especially in real estate. I didn't understand why things were so transactional. You know, I started to make money and just kind of to backtrack that, I started to make money. And I remember this one specific moment where I got a commission for 10 grand. It was like my first big commission. And then I'm like, oh my God, I can finally like quit the bar. You know, this is amazing. Like, I'm hood rich. Like, this is it. And I end up going to Chase Bank on Colonial. I deposit this check. And I remember driving away and I felt so empty. I felt so empty and I started crying. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Another death. And I'm like, holy shit, everything I've worked for that I've like burned my eyes and my body the past couple years, like none of this makes sense anymore. So that's when I started having these waves of change of this isn't where you're stopping, you know? So fast forward again to, coming back from India. When I was in India, I started Vedic astrology with a really amazing teacher and looking for answers. I was just like, please tell me what my chart says. And this man is like, you will always be on this esoteric path, but real estate is a big part of your life. And I'm like, what? There's no way. I'm not going back to that. I'm not back to opening McDonald's, and because, I was in retail. So I was like opening these QSRs and these big box tenants, and I'm just helping propagate this capitalism and this consumerism. I'm part of the system. So that was like the big thing that I had with like retail leasing and commercial real estate, where we were placemaking. But I'm like, what are we doing? Like these big strip centers with these tenants that are just selling shit,
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
like it's like what's the purpose? Like
Yeah, or like
just to make money and just to kind of lead people to more unhealthy lives and not really help elevate them.
100%, especially with food and with what we're consuming. So I was helping, at some point open, these chains, these franchises, and not to say any names, but like they're big names, and I'm like, dude, literally I'm helping more people get sick, while I'm filling my pocket and the landlord's pocket. So back to like coming back from India, I come back to the States, and I remember just what kept me anchored were my practices, meditation, the japa, ashtanga, which I still do till this day. And I just surrendered fully. And the first week I was back from India, I got connected. I have to keep this momentum of being uncomfortable and change. I got connected to one of my brother's friends who was a commercial real estate broker in Metro One, which happens to be Tony's company. And that's how my journey started with where I'm at now in the ecosystem I'm a part of in this moment. It's hard to not mention Tony because, him and his family, I love them so dearly. And not to get too into it, but for the first time I read the words regenerative real estate, and it was exactly almost exact of a feeling of a experience of this this sensation over my body as I had when I was 9 going to that astrologer,
Hmm.
where when I read the words regenerative real estate, my brain exploded. And I had inklings of something like this when I was in India, wavelengths of, okay, maybe I can bring mysticism into real estate. I started having these thoughts, these dreams about, these sacred spaces. And when I read that, like when I read, about everything that Future of Cities is doing and Chosen and these projects, I'm like, holy shit, this is exactly everything I've lived in my life has been leading up to this chapter.
So it just felt like a knowing. Like once it hit, you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
It was a full body experience, and it couldn't have happened before, it couldn't have happened after. It was at the perfect, exact moment in time and space.
Yeah, when you're ready for it, it just
When you're ready
lands.
for it. When
Yeah.
you're ready for it.
Well, that's cool too because
And
it's like it
yeah,
sounds like Tony was that first spark of, oh, this is possible, right? Because he was blending those two worlds, and it was kind of conflicting in your mind of like, but I want to, how do I, there's pros and cons to this, there's pros and cons to this, how do I blend this? And that's funny that you were saying when you're in India, there was like, it's always the thing that we have the most resistance to is always where our most growth is. Because you're like, right? And it just, it's funny. That's why I like these stories because it like highlights those moments where I'm like, oh, I feel so stuck. Or no, I said this even with podcasting. I publicly said 2 years ago, I'd never do a podcast. And I had so much resistance to it. And it's like now, like everything's coming out of it. So,
wow,
but yeah,
that's
sorry.
beautiful.
But yeah,
No, please.
then
Yeah.
you met Tony and got started there.
Yeah, so this is now 2 years ago that I moved to Miami, and I came back from India with nothing. I mean, I had $500 in my pocket, if that, and I had to renew my license, mundane world things. I had to, renew my tags. I had to move somewhere. I'm like, how is this how is this going to happen? My family wasn't in a position to like really support me financially. And I just, day by day, moment by moment, I just lived life at the exact moment. And everything, it's crazy. Everything just started showing up. It's like this commission that I forgot about ended up coming through, and I was able to like pay for this and that. And it was all like this puzzle piece of the universe, like orchestrating everything from, you know, coming to Miami, and my childhood friend had an open room. She's like, stay with me, you don't have to pay rent for like 2 months. All of these things, they just started to work out. And I look back, and this is something that I always tell people. It's like, we are always exactly where we need to be. Always,
Well, it
always,
seems like a
always,
big
always.
part was like the clarity too. It's like once the decision is clear, then the universe starts helping you out in those ways. It's like when we're not clear
Yeah,
and we're stuck, it's like we're stuck and there's nothing supporting us there really, right? But it sounds
yeah.
like once the regenerative real estate landed for you, it's like, oh, that's my piece. That's somewhere, that's the next part of my path. And then things just started to, appear, right? It's like in a magical way,
A
right?
hundred percent, a
But
hundred
also,
percent.
something you already said this twice though, you've had rituals throughout these years that kept you grounded and empowered, right? Because you said when I was struggling with these tough things, I had rituals, right? And rituals are tools to build ourselves energetically. It's like building our spiritual muscles, right? So I think that's a really big, I think that's really important to have rituals that keep us grounded, keep us focused, to keep us strong, because like when times get tough and it requires a lot of hope and faith, those are the things that keep us moving forward.
100%. And as you mentioned that, something that I really want to highlight and bring through to anyone that listens to this, it's like, if it wasn't for the teachers that have shown up in each chapter of my life, elders that have reminded me of the tools that already exist within me, I don't know where I would be. My relationship that I've cultivated, that I keep cultivating with my guides, with the plants, with nature, with the unseen, is what propels me to move in this 3D world. Without that, none of this would be. Vanessa
Yeah.
wouldn't be.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're always moving into that. Our fears are like the fear of the unknown, right? And you can look at the kind of spiritual stuff as like the unknown, right? It's like, oh, it's like, but we don't know until we do, until we throw ourselves in. And that's why we need teachers and people there at key points in our life to lead the way, to learn from, to, build us up so we can keep, because we don't build anything in the known, in the comfort zone. There's nothing built there, right? It's already established, right? So if we have to expand, we have to do, that's the only place to expand into, is that outer edge and the unknown. So it's gonna be scary, or kind of like you're gonna be unsure of yourself, but that's what it looks like, right? It's just being comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes.
100%. I mean, you can't see the path. It's like walking in the dark, and you have to trust that the path is there. Yeah, it's definitely something that you just have to keep reminding yourself that the universe is happening, this life is happening for you, for the development of what your soul came to learn in this lifetime.
Yeah.
I like to kind of thread back to the past and bring it back into the present. Some, going back to something that I mentioned with astrology, when I became like full-time astrologer, I found that people didn't want to go as deep, and I struggled with that. So bringing this piece of holistic wellness, of reminding people of who they are, I realized, and this is from Vanessa's experience, always talking from like my human experience, I realized, don't have to help reform people. You don't have to, because people only learn through their own experience. You don't learn through the intellectual level. I can cite you the Vedas. I can cite you the fucking mantras of each guru, of Ashtanga, of the Kabbalah, of everything, of astrology, of the planets.
And
But
just sit
people
there.
don't truly learn on the intellectual level. You have to have the experience yourself. That's why it's like, dude, whatever I share, it's like, don't even listen to it. You need to have your own experience. So I realized, holy shit, we can give people these experiences through the reformation of the built environment, where people can just heal themselves through these experiences that we are creating with placemaking, with regenerative
Well,
placemaking.
yeah, try to backtrack a little bit because I think
Yeah.
what is, I've been to these places with you, right? And it's like kind of going to the focus. It's like creating the sacred space, and the sacred into that space elevates their experience. So, when the container is clear, you're able to receive more, right? So when the
Yeah.
space is energetically good, right, and done right, then these people can receive at a higher level than just, what were you saying before? It was like the difference between spaces and places, right? It's like a place is somewhere where there's actually energy built and invested, right? It's more detail oriented. It's the sacredness, the heightened version of it, right? It's not just like sort of kind of what we're talking about with corporate real estate. It's not just like here's a fast food place and just kind of it's a very low energy, right? And it's like low energy environments lead to low energy results and regression of health and mental states and ultimately the spirit as well, right? So
Yeah.
really, would is it fair to say regenerative real estate is to create the positive environments to actually help people move forward and progress and grow, unlike
Yes.
really just anything else, you know?
100%. Regenerative real estate is, and I this is the phrase that always comes back to me. It's teaching people to love their environment again. And through teaching people to love their environment again, it's another way, of course, because there's many layers to it, but it's another way for people to remember themselves and to remember the connection we have to everything around us. Like, we're not separate from anything. So it's almost like allowing people that, you don't have to be a hermit and go do a vipassana in the fucking mountains,
Yeah.
because not everyone, that doesn't work for everyone. But if you are able to give people these places where they spark love, these, it's almost, you bring soul nourishment to these buildings, to these places. We want to build places for the soul to grow and flourish, not for just fucking NPCs, like for dead bodies. Or, I mean, even though dead bodies should also have a sacred space, but it's for
But it
people with
gives
life,
somebody,
like with things with life.
yeah, it's but sparks a new potential, right? It's like,
Yes.
yeah, I bet a lot of people who are new to a spiritual path or whatever it is, like when they encounter those places, like you said, it goes beyond just like the mind. It's like, oh, they can feel it. And it's like when we feel better, we do better as well too.
Yes.
So, it's not, we can't do the work for those people, but taking care of our own places and creating those sacred spaces gives more potential to, help people, evolve, right? And it's like what you said before,
100%.
it's like if we're it creates a container so they can actually create their container and develop internally as well too, because it's a mirrored thing, right? It's like
Yes.
a physical container is the same thing as your internal container. It's like if we don't take care of our internal state, and if we don't clear our own crap and our own stuff and
Yep.
raise the state of that, it's like the external is a reflection of the internal. So both things are important to not only take care of ourselves but take care of our environment. And there's a relationship there. It's
Yes.
like everything has, you can engage energetically with everything too. So it's like, what's your relationship with nature? What's your relationship with people? And it's like, living objects and non-living options. There's a relationship with everything there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you said it. It's the outside is a reflection of the inside. And I sometimes question, I'm like, what happened? It's like, where was that? What happened along the line where people stopped connecting to nature and in the built environment? I mean, we can talk about the Industrial Revolution and back to colonization, and that's what colonization is. It's like extracting the rituals and like the culture of people just to place something else there.
Yeah,
So
it's
we
like,
can talk about all of these historic things that have happened throughout history. And it's like that's what we're kind of going back to. It's like before all of these things happen in our society. I mean, I asked this question to this woman on this panel for Burning Man, because they talk a lot about art, how art is healing, and we're trying to bring art installations into our projects, and bring the authentic community, bring the artists, bring the storytellers. And it's such a key component to being human. The creativity, art is a big part.
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
expression.
I kind of like went around there a little bit.
Yeah, but it's so this has been around. We've had multiple conversations about sacredness in real estate, and it's been around for ages, right? It's like this used to be a normal part of life, and going back to mystery school and ancient teachings and how temples used to be built and certain things like sacred geometry, how those play a part in, sacred geometry creates a part in creating the energy for the space, right? So you can call in certain energies and you have different experiences there, right? It's like this used to be a more known part of life and just how things are. And it's funny, you can still see that like hidden in day-to-day life. Once you start learning these things, you're like, oh, I could see how that, roof is that way, or that place, or that's in that location, and that was the purpose of it. So it's cool that people are bringing that back. And it's, I think a lot of people there's sort of two sides. There's the modernization and kind of the making everything very industrial and very cold in that way. But then there's the people that are like, oh, I just want to go live in the woods and the mountains and stuff like that. It's like, well, everything has to progress, but it's like, let's do it in a way where we can modernize things, but also have the, the sacredness of it, right? So we can have these structures, these buildings, these offices, the homes, whatever it is, right? But it's still infused with that same energy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of came up when you were mentioning this is so right now I'm doing a master's in real estate development and urbanism at it's under the School of Architecture. So last semester I took a class on sacred spaces, and there's a lot of elements that make up a sacred space, and we studied a lot of basilicas and places in historic areas of Europe, like a lot of churches in Italy, and we focused a lot on like Christian and Catholic churches, but we talked about the Vastu Shastra, like in the Vedas, they talk about and in all religious scriptures, they talk about how to build basically cities and buildings, and which is super fascinating. But going back to what you were saying about people feeling good in these spaces, and how do we find like a medium between living in the woods and also like modern industrial
That's what it is.
infrastructure. And something that I've been learning about is biotexture. It's the materials that are used to build buildings, or to when you have an adaptive reuse project, it's like you can infuse materials into these buildings that are alive. So you can use live materials to build. And that's how our ancestors used to do it. Like they would like mix things up and make bricks out of like, I don't know, we just did a workshop at the hub with sugarcane residue, like the it's called bagaz. It's like the once you like crush the sugarcane, like leaves like
The
I don't know if you ever
gooiness,
seen
or
like sugarcane. No, it's like part of like the stick. It
is it
like turns
almost
into like
kind of like an aloe is, or kind of the
no,
within
it's
it?
like it's like it reminds me of like hay or something. But
Oh,
anyway, you
interesting.
like mix it with lime and like this other product, and you can start making bricks like out of this product, and it's not it's very cost effective, and it's just like we have to have people that are on this wavelength of awareness of our connection to everything to be disruptors in these industries, because the real estate industry, construction, all of that is it's like the most patriarchal, old school way of doing shit ever. Out of everything I've learned, it's like, holy shit, real estate's like the most
Well,
outdated.
you made a good point too. It's like that you need more people that are going to take on these projects and to raise the state of these things, right? It's like, but going back to your story, it's like all your spiritual path connected you to that. It prepared you to take on these bigger things, right? And so it's like, if that is the energy, I guess you can say, prepared you and gave you the clarity and creativity and everything to be able to handle these projects, right? The same thing with the people you're working on too. Like, we've talked about the people you work with and their history and kind of their preparation. And it's like, once you prepare yourself, then you can, it's sort of the higher mind. You have these higher visions of doing things in a better way, right? It's like when we're stuck in those lower states, we're not able to receive clarity and inspiration and ideas, right? So it's like
Yeah.
both of these things, it's kind of like, creating, going back to what we said about creating external space and creating internal space. You have to do, if you want to create things in the physical, you also have to create, continuously progress internally. And the more we grow and progress internally, the more we become a vessel to, when somebody's like, hey, well, how do we tackle this problem or that problem? It's like, we need creativity that goes beyond just the limitation that we're currently in. Right. And it's like, who's going to be able to, who's going to be able to receive that is the person who is clear, clear enough channel to have that come through. Right. And it's like, then it's a matter of like, what do we actually do with that? Right. That's
Yeah,
how,
100%.
that's how we were saying. It's like, that's how you can create, what we call like heaven on earth, right? Where we're elevating the state of everything, innovating faster, finding good solutions that work for everybody. It's more sustainable. It's more, there's more connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
there's no one without the other, right? It's like we have to continuously grow and progress. So our acts in the physical continuously grow and progress, right? It's very easy to say like, many people now with like everything that's going on, the world might be crazy and war and all this crap. They're like, oh, we're screwed. Like we're never going to solve it. People are stuck. People are this, that, whatever. And it's like, yeah, the average person can look at it and say, yeah, you're right. But it's like, it takes people that are doing the work, that are taking the responsibility, that are going through the hard stuff, at saying, hey, yes, this is kind of the base of where humanity is at, but we need leaders to actually propel us forward.
Yeah,
And that's,
100%.
that's where, if talking about purpose, mission, like that's where that really comes in. It's like your purpose or mission takes you beyond the mundane, right? It pushes you into new territory and just innovation and like, all the kind of craziness that comes with that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. I feel like if I could just kind of put what what I feel like my mission is, and I mean, it could always evolve and change, but I really feel like it's anchoring the energy of the divine feminine in real estate development. That's the key. And the more I connect with that inner divine feminine within me and balance these all of these different aspects of Vanessa, it's like the more that authentic, pure essence mission can come through.
Yeah, it's like the real estate's just kind of the container for that, right? So it's a piece
It's
in
the
a,
container.
yeah, it's a small piece in your bigger mission, right?
For sure. And there's
Yeah.
people anchoring this in the medical field, in the food industry, in education. I mean, we all have to work together to create this new reality in all of these different industries and cross collaborate
Yeah.
and learn about what's going on in different industries. I feel like,
That's a really good point you made about
yeah,
the feminine, because the feminine is, it inspires us to progress, right? Without beauty and feminine energy, let's talk about this like a basic masculine feminine. It's like without women, guys would be like, I'll just sleep under a rock. And there's no like, we're very basic. Guys need that, and areas need that too, because I've seen areas in like the northern US that are very, northern energy tends to be more masculine and cold. It's very industrial up there, right? There's like the steel mills and the like all that stuff, right? And those
yeah,
areas tend to be more stuck because they lack beauty, right? So nobody's really, if when we're lacking beauty, then nobody's really inspired to go to that next level.
yeah,
If a guy sees beauty, like what will a guy do if he sees a beautiful woman? It's like almost anything, run through a wall, like it doesn't matter. It's like that propels, working, that's the combination of the masculine and feminine working together. And you can't leave one of those pieces out. And there's a lot of um, disagreement, or men are better, women are better. And it's like, that's just not the case. If we're creating, divinity is I mean, those relationships coming together, right? It's like we can't build without relationships and teamwork. We can't have even children, right? It's like, that's the highest thing we can do. We can't have children without masculine and feminine energy coming together. It's just impossible, you know?
yeah, yeah,
So, yeah,
100%.
I think really what's needed, and what we were talking about before, is having, inspiring more people to really step into their power, or step into their feminine power, step into their masculine power. Yeah. because since there's so much confusion, it's kind of like, well, what is that? How do I actually use it? You know? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's something that's really lacking. So that's why I asked you to come on, because just we need more of that.
Yeah. No, I'm really grateful to have these conversations because it's beyond just sharing, our unique human experiences. It's also such an opportunity to learn, from each other. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like we're in this reality together, and I feel like you have to learn to really control that monkey mind to allow the mind to eventually be of service to the greater good and to humanity. And it's a combination of kind of like reiterating what we've been talking about. It's creating your inner space and taking care of your body, like and someone recently, this woman Kia, she put it so beautiful. She's like, the first community that you have for you to take care of is the community that lives within your body, your organs, your cells. That's the first community. And from there, from receiving clarity through organizing these communities within you, or your aspects of your personality, your traumas, your gifts, everything that is entailed in this framework of the human experience, then you can go out there and work from a place of love, of true, authentic, pure essence. And I feel like people's essences just get diluted with so much excess information of seeking on the outside. So yeah, so I hope that these spaces that we continue creating and that I eventually create, because for me, like my focus is creating sacred spaces in this modern society and what that looks like. And it's what I'm learning with Future of Cities. It's what I'm learning with school. It's how to ground down these mystical, spiritual ideals into actual concrete 3D world, which is for me, real estate.
Hmm.
So it's the framework, the analysis, the financials, how to support these projects in a real way, which is it's changing business models, it's changing the system basically of how we create, and also being guided by the scriptures of our ancestors that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. They had it pretty much figured out. It's just going back to being curious enough to educate yourself and finding there, because there's real fucking teachers out here that are like wisdom keepers of this knowledge, and infuse that into the way we live our lives, from the built environment to the way we live in community to our families and to the way we function within ourselves. I mean, this information is already available to us. You just have to quiet the mind and open the heart and be willing to receive it, you
That's so
know?
funny. I always tell people, like, the answers are always right in front. The solution you need is always right in front of you. The only difference is you're blocking it, right?
Yeah,
That's the
facts.
same
Yeah.
thing. We were talking about, you did that crazy 11-hour meditation,
The
but it's like,
Vipassana, yeah. Everyone needs to do it.
yeah. It's like, I mean, meditation. I used to, when I started, my spiritual journey, I used to like, meditation. Like, I just want to like go do, and like just do all these things. And it's like,
Yeah.
if we keep doing at that level, then we get the same results. And meditation, it's such an underrated tool because it's literally like, it's the act of doing nothing, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
but what's happening is you're just clearing out the junk and the monkey mind and the stuff. And it's like in that stillness, the stillness is the power, right? And then you take that stillness out in the world, and you're not thinking about your limitations and negative self-talk and crap, right? You're just clear, and then what you're creating becomes clear as well too, right?
I
So
love it. I
yeah,
love
if you
it.
want
You
to,
become sovereign. You become sovereign
yeah, you have
within your
control over yourself,
existence.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise it's all the external things, kind of the chatter and the mind junk, right? Like I tell people, I'm like, your mind is just like a shitbox of your stuff. Like, people, we've been talking about this multiple times in the conversation, but like, it's not, more information just doesn't do it, right? It's like being able to receive and then do is what moves you forward, So
Yeah.
it's like going, what we've continuously said, it's like creating a sacred space in ourselves. And that's like, you know, it's so easy to just do and create and all these things and just kind of spin our wheels and be in a state of inertia, right? Because people are like, well, what's success? And they're thinking like, oh, well, just the reason they don't know what really success is because they don't know where they're actually going, right? Because we're so disconnected spiritually. But Yeah, so there's a lot of doing without any like, looking at like, well, why am I actually doing this? Like, what am I actually putting into this? What energy is behind this? What details sort of glazing over of that stuff because people just don't know why, and there's that absence of the divine and sacredness of those things. Once we have connection, once we connect back to the divine, then everything we do is becomes more sacred.
Yeah, 100%.
Boom.
Everything is sacred when you look at life through the eyes of the divine,
Yeah,
and that's what we are. Yeah. I yeah, I'm looking forward to, of course, living moment to moment, but there's just so many layers to uncover in the path, and just being humble enough to know that you don't know shit and that
exactly.
there's something greater beyond us that's guiding us through. And I always say, like, we don't live through life, life lives through us. And all we got to do is just allow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I forget who it was. Oh, it was two podcasts ago. And the guy was like, I always wanted the whole plan. He's like, I wanted to see the whole plan. It's like, that would be its own limitation. It's like, if you knew the whole plan, you live out that whole plan, well, then what? That's a really good
Yeah.
question. I love asking my older clients, or people that are like, oh, I'm successful in this and that. I'm like, then what? And they're like, that will stump anybody, right? Because it's sort of like what you said. It's like, we don't know what we don't know. And that's an amazing thing because if we ever get to that point of like pure perfection, or that would just be stagnation, there would be no more room to grow, right? And if God and the universe is always expanding, and that's where the microcosm of that, and it's like we should always have the next level, the next whatever it is, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like
100%.
be comfortable with not, you don't have to know everything, and be very comfortable and like grateful that you don't know everything, right?
Or I mean, I would have never thought that so many setbacks, so many different paths that I took to get to where I'm at right now is like I would have never guessed it. And that's the beauty about life. And I still don't know. And, I'm here right now. I could be somewhere else tomorrow. And also accepting that life is impermanence. Everything is constantly changing. And that's why like living moment to moment was something that going to Vipassana reminded me of. It's like we don't have control over anything, and life is in the now. It's like accepting reality as it is in the present moment has
What's
been the key
having
to a lot of my peace.
Yeah, and you even said this too about the, I don't know how to say it. What's the word with the meditation?
Vipassana?
Yeah,
Vipassana.
yes, that's with the accent. But it's having a, we were saying when you're telling me your experience with it, right? And you're feeling kind of every almost atom in your body, right? And it's
Yeah.
this stillness within the stillness is where we have multiple experiences.
Hmm.
And that's where with the monkey mind, the kind of the rat race, that's what we're not having, right? And that was one of my biggest issues too, of like, I was always go, go, go and very intense. And it wasn't until my teacher was like, hey, like slow down. Nothing, like everything doesn't have to happen right this second. Right. And it's like, if you,
Bueno, Aries,
yeah, it's
addicted
like if
to
you,
intensity.
yeah, you're just always running yourself into a wall, and you're missing multiple experiences along the way that you can gain so much out of, right? It's like it's just overlooking those details, right? So yeah, stillness is a big
Yeah.
part. So before we sign off, if somebody is listening and they're either stuck in a dark place or they're just curious of what's next, what type of what's one big thing, or a drop of hope that you can give them so they can keep progressing along their path.
I think that the dark night of the soul is a big part of it. It was in my moments of darkness, of facing death, of loneliness, of, all these parts that are scary to the human being. It's been in darkness where I've found the keys to the gifts of wisdom and the light, like as cliche as that sounds. And I also feel that it's important for people to know that they're not alone. And I always encourage people to be open to finding a teacher. And it's not a teacher of like to clench on to this person or to, but it's for me, I feel like a big part of, for me, I measure success with like peace. And the peace that I've found has been from being curious enough to open myself to these elders that have shown up. And we talked about the crone earlier. To listen to the word of your inner crone, of that archetype of the elder, of that wisdom keeper within, and also know that they're out there, and to have discernment with the people that you get teachings from too. But I feel like we also have to find a balance between our effort and our ease. So the effort to be curious, to explore within yourself, and I think going to therapy, going to, somatic healing sessions, I think that that's a big help. And also being in the knowing of ease that you don't have to have it all figured out right now, and just allow life to happen.
Yeah, you have to rest and recover. It's like working out all the time. If you
Yeah.
don't take a break, you're just going to break yourself down. It's
Yeah.
polarity right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
For sure, dude. I mean, I was in isolation for like 3 years mostly. I mean, I had events and I would see people, but within me, I was embodying that inner hermit for a long time. And
That could
I'm
be
just
good,
starting to,
like short term. That's
yeah,
fine if you need to kind of back away from life to kind of look at things. That's fine short term. I usually tell people like maybe a week at the most, but like when it goes into like multiple weeks, months,
I was in the inner cave for a long time because I had to sit there,
yeah.
but yeah, but that's again like my own personal journey. I recently just actually told the client, she's like, what do I need to do next? Like to start my business? I'm like, actually, like the energetics available to you are for you to just shut the fuck up for at least 2 months. And she's like, okay, that resonates. I'm like, yeah, dude, chill. Like,
Yeah, you can be
it's
more,
okay. You don't always have to be doing.
yeah,
So,
you're more
anyway,
receptive.
that's my 2 cents.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate we covers a lot of cool things. And, if
Yeah,
anybody,
thank you.
is there a good way for people to connect with you if they want
Yeah, definitely. I'm super active on Instagram, so Astro Mezcal. On Instagram, yeah, message me. I'll reply maybe.
to, maybe? Perfect. All right. Well, I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, my friend.
Have a good one.
You too.